Hi everybody, it's Steph from Stellium Astrology here. I found myself a really nice little spot. I have no idea where I am. I went for a little drive with Ewan because it's really difficult to get him to sleep at the moment. So he's just in the back seat having a little snooze. And I'm sitting facing a dilapidated old clock tower and a building that has, all the windows have been smashed. It's cordoned off completely. I honestly don't know what that building is, and I just went past another building that's really fancy looking and quite big and grand. It's amazing what happens when you go on a little drive. And a couple of things before we get started. I thought I would just by the way, I'm Steph, if you're here for the first time. Steph from StelliumAstrology.com. I founded that website, and I'm also the host and founder of this podcast. I used to write horoscopes for Elle magazine and a number of other publications. I'm also published and a published writer, and I teach here and there for the London School of Astrology. I will be doing a talk for the London School of Astrology for their for the AA conference I think it's in September. They're yet to tell me which talk they want me to do, but I've submitted a couple of ideas for exploration, and I'm excited to find out what it is that they're interested in. I'll be teaching, doing a talk on behalf of the London School of Astrology at the AA conference later this year. Today I was just thinking about talking. I was going to do a show on the Synastry of Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz, because they got married recently. And I did actually record an episode, which I may later publish, but I actually thought it would be more interesting to explore Synastry, Synastry being relationship astrology. So I thought I would go into it really and talk to you about it. Now, I just want to remind you guys that this podcast is a kind of dipping your toe into something, but not totally immersing yourself in the subject. Though you could, if you binged it, you could immerse yourself totally, because I do, go into great detail on things, particularly over the basics that I've done previously. And I've had a couple of people contact me, and I have to say this week I kind of needed it. I had a couple of people contact me with some compliments. It was really nice. So I had the lovely Sasha get in touch with me, and she says, "Hi Stephanie, I'm quite a few episodes into your podcast, and I had to finally pause and message you. I thought to multiple times and then just keep listening. I just have to say I love all your episodes. You explain things so well and so pleasantly. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain / chatterbox myself, and I appreciate your style of bouncing around a bit. Just wanted to let you know I have tons of episodes left, which makes me happy, although I'm sure I'll binge through them soon enough." So thank you, Sasha, for getting in touch. That really did make my day. And I also had another on the same day. I don't know if they were sent on the same day, but I read them on the same day, from Harmony. And Harmony said, stumbled upon your podcast this week, and I'm in love. You're so easy on the ears, and I love your knowledge mixed with your perspective. You're very honest while also being quite positive. I'm not sure how you pull that off, but it's brilliant. Probably the reason I can pull that off is because I have Venus and Mercury in conjunction, which is Mercury is the silver tongue, and Venus really sweetens that information. It sugarcoats things. And also I have Saturn and Pluto squaring those planets. So I can be very honest. I can be very firm, with that Saturn and that Pluto. It's, I don't know, I find Saturn and Pluto together, depending on how you're working with it, I take those two planets together as with great power comes great responsibility, and I like to be impeccable with my word. I don't like to, I don't find it easy to lie, actually. I find it incredibly difficult. It's not my knee-jerk to lie. Sometimes I'll tell the truth, and then sometimes I'll think, I could have probably told a little white lie there and made it a little bit easier for the other person to hear that, but it never occurs to me until probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes after I've told the truth. But yeah, so that's probably part of the sweet talking combination that I've got there, that's also responsible and demands to be impeccable with its word. So I just want to say thank you for your messages, Sasha and Harmony. And I know other people message me too, but I just like to, when I remember, to just acknowledge that. So I just thought I would send a little message, well, not send a message, just say that I appreciate you getting in touch, actually. Now, Synastry. You may have heard me mention Synastry before. Synastry is kind of a big subject, actually. It's massive, actually. It's huge and it's very detailed. So I can't go into every little detail. Like I said, I can't go into everything. I can only give you pointers and help you to look for what to study yourself, where you need to go. And I will also draw from books that I own or have read. There's probably other books out there, and maybe if I miss certain recommendations, maybe you guys can get in touch and let me know which books work for you. I don't own all the books. I have worked on a number of bookstalls for the London School of Astrology and for the Astrological Association, so I have mingled with many books. I have walked past, before COVID was a thing, I've walked past the bookshelf and put my hand on the books and just run my hand across, because for me, books aren't just about information, it's about that sensual feeling of touching the cover of a book and touching the pages inside. I'm very, very, very sensory. Just thinking about that fills me with a lovely feeling, but also a little bit scary now because of COVID has ruined that for me. So actually, a couple of books that I'm going to tell you that I own have a lovely feel to the cover. So first of all, we've got Synastry by Penny Thornton. She was Princess Diana's astrologer, and she's written a book on relationships, and she actually uses Prince Charles and Diana in her example in her book. I read this book from cover to cover, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. You can see the person before me who's read it, I love getting second-hand books, by the way, has also done the same, and made their own personal notes and scribbles in the back, which I find always really fascinating when you find somebody else's writing in a book. I love it. It actually in the front says Christmas 1985 from Mum. That's nice, isn't it? That's how old this book is. Now another book that I've got is called From the Moment We Met, The Astrology of Adult Relationships by Brian Clark. That's one of the ones that feels lovely. Another book by Brian Clark that I have is called The Family Legacy, Astrological Imprints on Life, Love and Relationships, and that's another one by Brian Clark, another one that feels amazing. And another book here that I've got is called Planets in Love by John Townley. Now I know I've got some other books at home that are just screaming at me, saying, you didn't pick us up. Well, to start with, there's no way I could have carried every single book, because I also have a easy family cookbook, because I'm trying to learn how to cook weaning meals that work for the baby but also for me, so that I don't end up having to do like loads of different meals. And also I'm planning for the upcoming eclipse season, and also upcoming Mercury retrograde next month. There's all sorts of stuff going on, so I've got it in my bag so that whenever I'm out and about, I've got stuff that I can be doing if Ewan falls asleep. So the other book I've got is Planets in Love by John Townley, and I've also got another book by him called Lunar Returns, not with me, but one that I want to read at some point. So there's just a few books that I've got just to hand. Now you might be wondering why I've picked up one about family when we're talking about relationship astrology or synastry. The reason why is because just because we are in a family with somebody and we have brothers and sisters or mums or dads, or stepmums, stepdads, stepsisters, stepbrothers, adoptive children, babies of our own, maybe babies with multiple partners, the complications of family, that also is a type of synastry, because we have a relationship with every single one of those individuals. It's interesting that you can have a relationship with someone for many years, and then when you have a baby, your whole relationship dynamic shifts, and that baby then has a relationship with both of you, and you both have a relationship with that baby. So it's interesting to think about how relationships change and shift. Now for me, I think without going into too much detail, I've written some notes here, just some scribbles, but nothing really exhaustive. because I don't want this to be a really long episode. This is more of a kind of introduction, and then I'll be looking at things in more detail as we look, as perhaps the weeks go on, because I'm going to do a few episodes on this, I've decided. It's nice to have a bit of direction, isn't it? It's Aries season. Well, actually, it's shifting into Taurus season now, but I've been sort of thinking and getting things done, and there is a lot of Pisces energy, so it's a little bit scattered, but actually I quite vibe with the Pisces energy. But yeah, having the sun in Aries, it's given us a bit of a sense of get up and go, even though we're still a little bit mutable, and our energy's a bit dispersed with that, all that Pisces stuff. But yeah, I've got some ideas of who I want to talk about as far as relationships are concerned. I may talk about Brooklyn and Nicola. I may publish that episode later on down the line, or I may re-record it. But let's have a look at Synastry. Basically, I feel that Synastry, relationships, no matter who it's with, whether it's family, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's your employees, if you have employees, whether it's your even if it's your pets, you can have a look at the Synastry that you have with pets, and if you don't have their birth date, then you can look at the chart that you got them and see how that works for you. But maybe it's like a romantic Synastry, maybe it's like husband, wife, or perhaps it's boyfriend, girlfriend type stuff. Maybe you're polygamous and you have more than one person in your relationship. The Synastry is basically about you and how you fit with other people, how your chart kind of triggers other people. You can almost think of like with your own natal chart, you've got your sun, your moon, all of your personal planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and then your social planets, Jupiter and Saturn, and then your transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. And then let's not forget about things like the nodes, or maybe we've got things like Black Moon Lilith, or we've got asteroids and dwarf planets to consider. There's loads of different things that you can look at in the chart. All of those things make aspects to other planets in your natal chart. So understanding yourself is very, very, it's a life's work, actually. You never can really fully understand yourself looking at the natal chart. You just can't. It's impossible to just take it one look and understand it. It's so multifaceted. You could look at your own chart a million times and not really understand certain elements of the symbolism that has been expressed until years down the line, when you suddenly understand different layers of that symbolism. It's just a never-ending bottomless barrel, a bottomless brunch. Basically, your chart is a bottomless brunch. Wow, I must be hungry again. How do I always end up talking about food? But yeah, there's a sense of like, you can keep on dining out on your own natal chart for a very, very, very long time. What other people do to add other people to the mix of your chart is actually allows us to understand ourselves on a deeper level if we can get over how much we're triggered by them. So it's really hard, because if you look at your relationships, and actually it's interesting because the recent full moon in Libra, which was square Pluto in Capricorn, I called that one Illuminating the Shadow. That was for my patrons. And the reason I called it that was because the sun and the moon reflect, and they are relationship indicators in the chart. But on top of that, to be square to Pluto has us digging deep, and it actually is the shadow in the natal chart. It can be. So having a look at how it's illuminating Pluto can highlight some of the deepest, darkest fears that we have. It can highlight some of the most difficult situations where we are really in a non-negotiable position, and it can also highlight some of the depths of our own minds, our own psyche. But we have to be able to step back in a kind of third person to our own life and say, okay, I'm super triggered by this. Okay, this is a really horrible situation to be in. Okay, I really don't like where I'm at right now. But actually, what's the real truth here? What am I going to learn about myself and other people through this interaction, which is causing me to dig as deep as I am? By the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm in the car. I think I did mention it, that I'm sitting across from a clock tower. So yeah, if you hear noises, it's just life going on around me. So yeah, so this ability, this recent full moon, is an interesting example to use because it does involve, every full moon involves the sun and the moon being in opposition. And the sun and the moon in synastry are one of the key elements to explore when you're looking at relationships. So when you think about how other people trigger us and how other people cause us to react, there's a choice of acting or reacting. So we can react to something that's happened, and we think of the moon when we think about react, because almost we are, it's a knee-jerk, it's an emotional response, whereas the sun, we could almost take that as an action. It's like understanding, illuminating, and then moving forward with knowledge and consciousness and mindfulness, as opposed to feeling, sensitivity, and a sense of emotional trigger. So when you have a full moon, often we know that there are issues with more raucous behaviour, things that tend to be out in the open more, and there tends to be a sense of, what's the word? It's kind of like a bit more, everything is more obvious during a full moon, whereas, during new moon, it's not so much. But how does this relate? So, when we think about how we relate to other people, what really matters. So, like I said, there are relationship indicators in the chart. So, main relationship indicators are the sun and the moon. Obviously, they're hugely important, not just about knowing ourselves, not just about learning our own style, but also about how we interact with other people. A lot of people say, oh, I'm a Capricorn and I'm with a Sagittarius. That's supposed to be a really bad combination, isn't it? And it's like, well, if you're really going to reduce it down to the simplicity of just the sun sign, then yeah, you could say that they're not necessarily the best because they're next door neighbours. And instead of being in a sextile, like maybe the sun in Capricorn and the sun in Pisces, like Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz, if you've got like the sun in Capricorn and the sun in Sagittarius in the relationship, there's challenges where the sun in Capricorn has graduated above or beyond the Sagittarius quest, and so there's a sense of slight discomfort in them being in a relationship, because one is about limitlessness and exploration, kind of almost like a sense of fearlessness, but just more faith and risk-taking. And then you go into Capricorn, where it's like, actually, I do believe in limits, and actually, I don't like taking risks, and actually, I do think that, rules and regulations are better than just having faith that everything will be okay and allowing things to just sort of follow their own natural path. There's a mutability about Sagittarius, and there's a cardinality about Capricorn. These things, if you look at the ruling planets, Saturn and Jupiter, social planets. One's about beliefs and one's about authority. One's kind of more about having a philosophy, learning and teaching, broadcasting, and expansiveness and consciousness almost. And then you've got Capricorn, which is about confinement and structure. I'm not saying it's bad and it will never work between a Capricorn and a Sagittarius. That's what me and my partner are. All I'm saying is, there are definitely going to be different approaches to life, and that's just through the sun sign. So what we want to do is look at other planets in the relationship. So we might have, Venus and Mars, who are the other relationship indicators. So we've got Sun, Moon, Mars and Venus, and these are archetypes that we look at in the chart. So obviously we can look at not only where these are in the chart, so the zodiac signs and the type of Mars or the type of Venus that you have and what's important to those Mars and Venus placements, but also the mode and the element, because the elements and the modes are also very important. regardless of where the personal planets are, you could just look at an overall image of the charts and say, what's the most prominent element and what's the most prominent mode? I know a girl who was in a relationship with another girl. They were quite young at the time, and this girl was is a Taurus Moon and a Pisces Sun, and the person she was in a relationship with, now I can't remember, I think they had a Libra Sun and an Aquarius Moon. Okay, and when I looked at how heavily weighted the elements and modes were. The girl who was the Pisces Sun and the Taurus Moon lacked Libra in her chart. Libra, so cardinality was lacking and air was lacking. And in the other girl's chart, I calculated her most prominent elements and modes and her weakest was fixity and earth. So she was looking for the earthiness of this girl's moon, and the other girl was looking for the cardinality and the airy quality of this girl's Libra Sun. So it's interesting because we attract what we lack. It's a bit like the opposites attract principle. It's also a little bit like what we look for on the descendant, or what we project on the descendant. So we have a sense of what we cannot integrate or understand as our own, even though we are the chart as a whole, including every single zodiac sign, though some are going to be more heavily populated than others. Some are going to be more personal, closer to the ascendant and the eastern side of the chart, and some are going to be more other people orientated, like the western side of the chart and the descendant. So that's interesting to take into consideration. The elements and the modes, the emphasis, looking at, the angles, so, the ascendant and descendant, and also the midheaven and the IC. Looking at relationship planets like the Sun, the Moon, Mars and Venus. It's not just about those planets though, because there are other planets that are important. We have Mercury. Mercury is so important in astrology. It is like, in synastry, sorry. I would say that probably not the most important, but it is really up there. Mercury is super duper important. And because it's the way we communicate, it's the way we think, and really ultimately relationships, before we can get together, if you just had like a physical thing, like if you had like a one night stand or something, if you met somebody in a nightclub and you took them home, and you were like, this is a physical thing, and then the next day you woke up and you were like, lovely to meet you. I've got a friend actually, she's very, very adventurous. She's a Sagittarius and she likes to go all over the world. She travels all over. She's got a very interesting job, and she stopped over in a city in the USA once, and she met this guy in a bar. They had a really great night. She went back to his, they had a most amazing sex, and then they were just like, bye, nice to meet you, see ya, and they went their separate ways. That's great if that works for you. Not everyone's going to be able to do that type of thing, because it's just not something that they can do. And what's good about that kind of thing is that it rules out the need for having to get any deeper. It's a very, very, it serves a few needs, it serves a few purposes, but ultimately it doesn't really go anywhere. Possibly people can have a bigger impact, and that could be a different type of synastry, like if there was a long-term health issue that followed that kind of contact, or, something like that, like maybe on a drunken night out, she got his name tattooed on her butt cheek and then spent the rest of her life regretting it. I'm sure there would be some kind of permanence about that kind of short-lived fling, or potentially, if there was like an STD that was picked up, then, you could say there was definitely some kind of synastry where there was an impact from one to the other. The fact that they were attracted to each other means they had synastry anyway. But, Mercury is not going to be so prominently, featured for them in a long-term sense. They may have had a Mercury conjunction and really enjoyed it, but there may have been, there could be multiple outcomes for looking at their natal charts as individuals and why they came together on that night. However, on long-term relationship charts, Mercury has to be in a favourable position, well placed, well aspected, in order for a relationship to really have any kind of longevity, purely because if you don't have communication in a relationship, if you can't express yourself in a way that the other person understands, then you can't be happy and in harmony. it doesn't work. An interesting insight for you guys. So me and my ex-boyfriend of 10 years had a Mercury conjunction. We both have Mercury in Aquarius. My Mercury was at about 2 degrees. His was about 8. Now, what was interesting was that his Saturn and his Uranus and my Saturn were in conjunction. My Saturn squares my Mercury. His Uranus squared my Mercury. My Saturn was square his Mercury, but not quite exactly, not as exactly as his Uranus on my Mercury. And my Uranus at 8 degrees of Sagittarius was sextile his Mercury. So we had a Uranus kind of relationship. There was a sense of Uranian quality about our communication style. What happened when I first met him was the conversations we had literally fired me up with like excitement, all the ideas, all the things we talked about. It was like I'd known him for my whole life and longer. I'm pretty sure we got past life stuff going on. You know, it was a really exciting and fun relationship. But as time went on, I always felt like, well, it was funny, he always felt like I interrupted him, and he'd get really annoyed with me, and he'd take me the wrong way a lot of the time, and he'd be quite sensitive. There was other synastry as well, like his moon was bang on my ascendant, so he was in Gemini, so he'd get quite sensitive to some of the things I would say to him sometimes. And you know, there was this kind of disrupted quality about the smoothness of our communication style. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, that is the end of a relationship, but Uranus squaring Mercury is going to have a disruptive, it's going to disrupt things in a way. And actually, you know, it didn't last with me and him, actually. You know, we had a lot of issues. We had a great relationship in many ways, but in some ways it just didn't work. And there were other issues that caused it not to work as well. But, you know, in a nutshell, just taking that from it, you know, it was very interesting looking at our charts. And as time goes by, the more you look at somebody's chart on yours, the more you spot things, just like with your own natal chart. So yeah, there are things that can push the chart apart. So Uranus in a poor place can be a bit of a separator, and like a repellent. Saturn, on the other hand, can act like a kind of relationship glue. If you see Saturn involved in the natal chart, it can really bring people together, and it's almost like that kind of till death us do part type thing. When Saturn is anchoring two planets, it holds them together. You know, with some charts, you can see a sense of commitment with Saturn. Some, depending on where it is, it can be very difficult, you know, to work with. But generally speaking, when Saturn's involved, there's a sense of commitment, a sense of keeping people together, the glue, the kind of the bond that you have with somebody. And actually, it can also indicate a kind of a sense of destiny in a relationship as well. Sometimes you meet people who have a huge influence over your life. My Reiki master, her Saturn was on my sun, and Frank Clifford, the principal of the London School of Astrology, his Saturn is on my ascendant, really, really tight. So it's interesting because you meet these people who have a very, very, I think with Saturn as well, for myself, to speak of it personally through my Reiki master and through Frank, there's a sense that they almost can sculpt you into who you were born to be, particularly as myself as a Capricorn sun, being sculpted into, you know, this kind of providing the structure, providing the element of the role model for me to understand where I want to go, how I want to conduct myself, who I want to be in life. You know, particularly with the Reiki master, the fact I chose her to be my master is interesting. And Frank Clifford is my mentor. You know, there is that element. So it's very interesting to look at. Now, some of the challenges that present themselves, like I talked about Uranus, but there's also a challenge with, you know, Mars. If you meet somebody whose Mars is square or Mars, that can be very difficult. It can feel like fireworks. It can be that chemistry that maybe you meet somebody and that's what gets you to have a one-night stand, for example. long term, it can fizzle from fireworks into war. It can be a real challenge of like butting heads. If you think of the ram, Mars being the ruler of Aries, if you think about the ram from each side butting heads, instead of working together, they're arguing. Mars already, the 90-degree angle is already a challenging aspect, fueled with Martian energy. In fact, a couple of things I've talked about: calculating the elemental and modal emphasis. I've done an episode on that, which I'll have to include in the bio. And also I've talked about how you can tell what kind of essence each of the aspects carries, and explains why Mars, the square, is Mars. So I'll have to tag those below. Did them quite a while ago as enhanced podcast episodes for you guys. Again, Venus square Venus is like the opposite of having an attraction with somebody. I know somebody who I have a Mars square with and a Venus square. Now, I don't find him attractive at all, and I know he doesn't find me attractive either. We don't actually really like each other. We can't really hang out. There have been a couple of times when we've enjoyed each other's company, but generally speaking, we are totally different people on different pages. I don't respect him. He doesn't respect me. And you'd think, looking at our charts, you go, oh, look at that. He's got Capricorn rising and he's an Aries. That cardinality could work. And, her sun is around his ascendant. You'd think, oh, that might be good synastry. And he's got a Gemini moon. So that sounds like it would work with my chart. But actually, no. Because we've got that Mars square and we've also got a Venus square. So it's like we don't find each other attractive. In fact, our value system are completely in conflict with one another. If you think about the fact that Venus is our values and what we prioritise, what's important, what we value, our moral code. And then, the Mars square as well, like what we aiming for in life, our goals and our kind of way from getting from A to B, or getting from where you are now to where you're aiming for, and kind of like the approach that you take to get there, as well as it being like sexual attraction, that friction that gets you, that literally can take your breath away when you meet somebody. For example, I was in a bar once with a guy, I was in a bar with the guy that I'm with now, but there was another guy there, and while we were talking, I felt this very strong attraction. He was incredibly good looking, in my opinion, and as we were talking, I felt this like burning in my chest and this pull towards him, and I thought, I bet me and him have a Mars square. And I said, please, can I look at your birth chart? And he got his details for me, and I had a look, and what do you know, his Mars was in Scorpio, square my Mars in Aquarius, and I was like, that is what the Mars square feels like. It's like the kind of thing that makes you throw all caution to the wind and to just be spontaneous, act on your impulses. And I'm not saying that I would have done this with this guy, because I wasn't actually interested in him. I'm so like airy that like anything that's going on with me, I'm generally like, oh, I wonder what that could mean astrologically. That's what Mars in Aquarius does. It tries to rationalise everything, along with everything else in my Aquarius stellium. It's very, it's much more thinky than feely. Thank goodness, because my Scorpio moon's very feely. But yeah, so it's interesting to think about what square. Also, Mercury square Mercury. Now that can be a challenge as well, because you're both on singing from different hymn sheets. Basically, you're on a different page. You're both on different pages. Generally, with Mercury square Mercury, you tend to be reading the wrong book. I mentioned before the angles. So if you've got like your ascendant and your descendant in the same as somebody else in a relationship, or even if they're flipped, you can get a sense of like comfort, ease of communication with them, like a kind of, where each other's coming from. And the same with the MC and the IC. So I have people who I'm ascendant buddies with. So Frank Clifford is one of them. We have very similar ascendant degrees, and we have the same ascendant, descendant, and actually the same midheaven and IC. And then I also have Marina from Dark Star Astrology. We are practically the same ascendant, descendant, and midheaven. And I also have my friend Fernanda Piver, another astrologer who I've interviewed on the podcast. Her midheaven and IC are completely opposite to mine, but the exact same degree. You have a sense of the other person and you get them. You kind of just get who they are and what they're all about. So other people, there's somebody else, my best friend. If you want to think about relationships and stuff, you can talk about your friendships as well as you can talk about romantic relationships with Synastry. Me and my best friend, she's got a Gemini stellium, and my ascendant is all of her planets in Gemini are all over my ascendant. Her moon is the exact same degree as my sun in Capricorn, and she's got stuff going on in Scorpio. So of course we're going to have stuff going on in, that we really get each other. And it's funny, whatever's going on with her, we're having almost a mirror in each other's lives with slight adjustments. So whenever I contact her and I'm going, oh my God, this thing's going on, is really, really difficult. For example, I moved to a different part of the country, she moved to a different country, and then we had all these challenges where she was too far away from her family to be able to go and visit them, but she had her own family, and I was too far away from my family to be able to visit properly, and we had all these other complications going on in our life involving other people, and we used to talk to each other on a regular basis to try and make sense of what was going on, and we could completely relate to each other, but with very different situations, but they almost mirrored each other. So it's very interesting how Synastry works. Sometimes somebody can be talking and they'll almost be describing aspects of your past, and you can say, I'm sure we've got Synastry. Like a colleague of mine, he and I would talk about the days we'd go out raving and our checkered pasts, doing all sorts of naughty things. And when I looked at his chart, his Mercury was on my moon. He was literally, I was reflecting experiences back to him. It's almost like we had a sibling relationship. He also had his Mars on my Venus. So there's this real sense of like understanding each other. But anyway, so I've really talked a lot about that at the moment, and this is without really going into any kind of detail. But to sum it up, really, what I've written here is that your birth chart, your own individual birth chart, is your own love language. But there's so much more than just like one of 5 types. It's extremely complicated. And your chart is the key to understanding yourself, and relationships are the key to understanding deeper personal understanding. So actually, before we go anywhere with Synastry, we kind of have to understand ourselves. But if we can't see ourselves and see the whole picture, we have to understand that what we get from other people is merely an opportunity to look within and understand why we're feeling the way we do, what it's triggering in us. And of course, I'm not saying live your life in this kind of totally disconnected state constantly. You have to understand that relationships literally trigger us into taking actions or acting in a way that helps our own personal life story unfold. And that's where I'm going to leave it today. I hope you found it interesting, and over the next few weeks I'm going to have a look at some different charts, and I'm going to start looking at aspects of Synastry within those charts to explore, hopefully pick some really interesting ones for you so that we can really get a good understanding of how to look at Synastry and what we do, what we do with that kind of, with the chart, and how we can explore it. So I'm just returning to record right now because I had this idea. We're quite far into the Stellium Astrology podcast now, so we're in the 90s as far as the episodes are concerned. So number 100 is fast approaching. So I want to make number 100 kind of a bit different, a bit of a celebration. So I'm thinking maybe for the 100th episode, you get to ask me questions about anything, not just astrology, and I can answer your questions. I can either enlist the help of a friend of mine who can interview me, or I can do it on my own. But however I figure it out, I'm thinking it would be fun to be interviewed for my own podcast. Maybe a little bit narcissistic, but who knows? I just thought that would be fun. And I'm also thinking of getting some sort of like, introducing a new service, and maybe even maybe having like a prize draw or something, or a special offer for like the 100th episode. So I just thought I'd stitch this on to the episode I literally just recorded the other day. so that I can get that out for you guys. And while I'm kind of forming my ideas around what I want to do for number 100, I'll create little forms. So all you have to do, if you're listening to this on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, the link will be in the description, and you can literally just press the link, write down an idea or a question, and submit it for me, so that I can then use that information to put together the 100th episode. I don't know, you guys, like, what do you think? I think that would be quite fun. So yeah, that's where I'm at in my thoughts right now, and I'm going to be bringing it all together. I think we're about episode 92 or 93 right now. I just lose track. So yeah, I think that it'll be really good fun to interview me, because I was thinking, oh, what can I do for the 100th episode? I just don't know. And I thought, why not just like answer your questions and then also get somebody to interview me, like somebody. I'm thinking of the girl that used to host my old podcast. I think she's got a beautiful, I love her voice. I know I've got a lot of US listeners, and she's from the US, so maybe we can coordinate our calendars, get together. She can interview me and we can use a few questions. We've got a few weeks yet, so we can try and get that down and get that sorted. If you're enjoying it, please review me on Spotify, or rate me on Spotify. You can also rate me on Apple Podcasts or any of the platforms you're listening. Don't forget to send me a message if you're enjoying the show, because I will give you a shout out, as long as I remember. I'm a bit of a disorganised what is it called? Cotton-headed ninny muffin. I think that's what Elf says on that Will Ferrell film. But also, if you can't rate or review me anywhere, don't forget to follow me, subscribe on YouTube. And if you do, screenshot and email me, Stephanie@stelliumastrology.com, STEFANIE@stelliumastrology.com. And remember that I am going to be sending a Magic of I astrological planner to one lucky listener who I pull out of a hat, hopefully before Christmas and New Year, so that you can start the next year, 2023, with a sense of at least focus on understanding yourself and the rhythms of the planets in a better way. And I think that's kind of it. So yeah, take care guys, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.